Hey everybody, welcome back to Fireside Chats with Mr. Grumpy. I love this song. Wish I could play the full thing, and the music stops. So, tonight's episode is called How Punk Rock Destroyed and Saved My Life at the Exact Same Time. This episode is another lighthearted show. The next one will not be. With that in mind, so punk rock has always been something that has changed the way that I thought about the future, the past, and the present. That is always constantly changing. It has no voice of reason. It just is, and it stands against things that are just improper and wrong. And in today's politics, I'm surprised I don't hear more releases coming out from some of the bands that I used to listen to. Even Christian punk bands that started the whole Aaron loves punk rock era. I don't hear much from pretty much anyone unless they're writing them right now. Like, I really thought I would hear something from Strike Anywhere, or even possibly the Dead Kennedys would come back, or Jello would do something, or there might be a rise from Ian McCain from Minor Threat. If I said his name incorrectly, you can revoke my punk rock points. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter to me. Even Green Day doing American Idiot concerning Bush, whatever. It almost sucked. Had like one good song on it, and then the radio decided to just butcher everything. And anyways, so this story is not about current politics or any of the Trump dynasty, I guess you would call it. I'm going to cut half this stuff out anyways. So when I was growing up, punk rock was inaccessible to me, and it was not readily available. It was something that only you would hear on the radio when Green Day would play. And, at the time, my parents were not having the Longview lyrics have their impact on my young adult mind at the time. So the story kind of is odd, because a lot of punk rockers start with Minor Threat and Black Flag and, even Iggy Pop and Minor Threat. I think I already said Minor Threat, but like Clit 45 and Gorilla Biscuits and all these bands that I could list as, somebody's starting point. It's not mine. I'm an early 90s punk rocker, but all the bands that I should have heard at the time were not the bands that I heard. I actually found them out after I found a copy of Maximum Rock and Roll at the local bookstore, but that, we'll get to that. So my first CD when I was growing up, as I said on the previous show, I was really into Motown and 60s, 70s, and 80s music. A lot of stuff that was, catchy, very radio-friendly. My parents were, I wouldn't say heavy Christians at the time. They were more moderate at that point in their lives, and, they were just trying to impose religious beliefs, which is another story that I'm going to tell probably maybe tonight, maybe another night, on a different episode. But this is how punk rock saved my life and destroyed it at the same time. My first, other than Green Day, was a band called MXPX, and their album was called Teenage Politics, and I believe the first song that I ever heard was Teenage Politics. And to set the scene of how I heard this is, even with my current views, it's still one of those things that is so weird in how I got to where I am today. So, Roscoe, Illinois, tiny town, 10 miles away from Wisconsin, 10 miles away from Rockford, Illinois, an hour and 20 from Chicago. We have this store called Video Outlet, and the only reason I say this is if you are someone from Illinois, you can definitely understand the location of this. It was the Video Outlet. It was right next to the Dairy Queen, and it was a Christian bookstore. And they were playing the Steve Curtis Chapman and the DC Talk, and my mom needed to go there for, I don't remember what she needed to pick up, but she was a fairly religious person at all times in her life, I think. I don't think she had any bouts of doubt of God, I guess, you know. I'm not really concerned about that in this episode. So we're walking through the store, and I'm just like, oh my God, why are we here? Can we just go rent a movie? Can we go rent Evil Dead again? I really love that movie. And I was listening to the music, and I was like, oh my God, this shit is so lame. And, you know, DC Talk was alright, I guess. Some of it sounded kind of rapish, I guess, which, you know, I was into rap music at the time. I mean, Notorious Big was out, and Tupac, and, you know, my friends all had those CDs. My first CD was The Lion King. Oy vey. Can You Feel the Love Tonight by Elton John. That song is forever embedded in my mind. I can't forget it. In fact, I kind of want to sing it, but I'm not going to because I respect all of you. And while I'm in this bookstore, they have a CD section, and, you know, so they have one of those tiny music players that used to be, like, super relevant. You know, you press the button and it gives you 30 seconds or something. So I'm just being an asshole and pressing random buttons and annoying the other people in the store. Because I'm just like, I don't want to be here. It's not cool for me. I got things to do, like Final Fantasy on SNES. And I'm just like, yeah. So I'm just annoying other people. And then on the loudspeaker comes Teenage Politics by MXPX. This song is so frustratingly loud, and the lyrics are cheesy. And it sounds like Green Day, but it's in a God House store. So I'm like, all right, man. I can actually dig what this band is doing. I really enjoy it. And I could probably get away with purchasing this because it's in a Christian bookstore. So I immediately go over to an associate who's working in the store. And I'm like, hey, who's playing right now? Oh, this is my favorite band, MXPX. It stands for Magnified Plaid. I was like, that's the douchiest name I've ever heard in my life. So, with that, I'm like, hey, Mom, I found a CD I want. It actually had, like, this terrible green, light green, dark green with, like, this punk who looked like he was out of his mind on meth, with spiked hair and blue pants, and obviously you could tell it was like a cheesy punk CD. There was no way to describe it, and, you know, this band was just like, I listened to it, there was 18 songs on the album, and I ripped through them. I got home, I ripped that cellophane paper that was a bitch to take off, and I threw it in the CD player in the basement where my sound system was, and within 5 minutes of getting that CD, my mom was like, turn that shit down. You know, shit being a different word, but you can understand what I'm saying. It was so just raw to me, and this was my epic Green Days Dookie. And I was like, hey, you know, and it was a CD, it wasn't a cassette. I had to actually, a few months later, my friend Nick W. had a copy of Dookie on cassette, and I was able to get a mixtape of Green Day's Dookie. And between Green Day's Dookie and MXPX, I was blasting the fuck out of that shit in my headphones because that was such a raw, loud, non-giving a damn efforts. And it was so much fun because that was my entrance into an entire, not just music, but a culture. So as I grew a little older, I realized that there were friends of mine that were playing music in bands, and they were just angrier than the music on the cassettes and the CDs. And by that time, I knew who NoFX was. I knew who Screeching Weasel was. I knew some of the majors that were hitting. I still hadn't heard too much of like Dead Kennedys or Black Flag yet, but I knew bands that were playing noise. I knew bands that were playing so much different styles other than just like MXPX and Green Day and NoFX and that South California punk rock line. And it was just epic. And it was only a matter of time before I begged to get a guitar. And listening to a local band called Carly's Day Out was just a tremendous thing to me. I'm actually going to play some of it here now for you. So if you give me a moment, I will get that up and going. But you can understand how, being a juvenile 13, 14, 15-year-old kid and hearing this can definitely change the way that you think because everything else is pop garbage. And Soundgarden and Nirvana had their time. My mom wouldn't even let me get Nirvana. And there's no cursing in Nevermind at all. She only knew the In Utero song Rape Me by Nirvana and Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nevermind. She's like, I don't want you to have this at all. And, I didn't really blame her, but I was also, in the same time, really loving Sublime because I'm 13, 14, 15, and keep in mind the internet doesn't exist, and you don't have like a cassette tape player of all the hits coming out of Cali and New York. I mean, if somebody would have given me a Gorilla Biscuit CD at 13, probably would have thrown shit around my room and gone, this is the new revolution. So if you give me just a half a second, I'll play that Carly's Day Out song for you.